This is my Tippmann Arms M4-22. I have maybe 400 rounds through this now, and I picked this up after a friend's son got started in a youth shooting program and they were using the rifle. They told me about it and I thought it sounded pretty neat, so I grabbed one thinking that it would be fun to shoot. And I do shoot some indoor 50-foot position shooting this time of year. Here's one of my targets that I shot with the Tippmann. I almost went clean on this one, but I blew it there. So, but anyway, I really do like the rifle. They're made in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I've talked with the company about some things I want to do with this rifle, and I've been getting parts around to do it. It is not in a stock configuration right now. I've made a couple of quick changes to it. Let me show what it came, how it was configured when I purchased it, and then I'll kind of go over the things that I've changed so far. But you know, here's the box that it shipped in. I bought it down at the local shop and did it that way. But it comes with a typical M4 stock, which I didn't care for that. I you know, it was a little wobbly, which a lot of them are. That's just kind of how it is. It originally had these fold-up sights on it, which they look a lot like a Magpul sight. I don't know if they're, you know, who makes them, who molds them, if they're sourced from somewhere, obviously. But I didn't use those. I wanted to run optics anyway. Nice book that it comes packaged with. This was the sling plate or whatnot that typically is on there. Had the larger magazine, which the type of shooting I do, the 10-round magazines are more appropriate. And then this was the handguard. Now, the model that I bought, there's a couple of different models. The model that I bought has the aluminum floated handguard, and the barrel nuts right there, you can see that. So what I changed to, what I found is in my position shooting, the diameter of this handguard was simply too small for my hold. I couldn't get enough elevation out of it. So I put on this float tube. It's a standard barrel nut and float tube. And then I originally tried just the Magpul MOE fixed stock, but the length of pull is just too short on this for the type of shooting that I do. So then I changed to this Magpul. This is the PRS Lite stock. Here's the packaging for that. And I do like the way that this feels. This gives you more length and more rigidity than an M4 stock would, or the Magpul MOE fixed stock. But it mounts on a carbine length buffer tube, which is handy in the case of the Tippmann. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. And then I did, let me show it here. Here's the stock trigger parts. This just has one of the ALG Defense ACT triggers in it right now, which is an improvement, but it is certainly not a target trigger or a match trigger, but it works pretty well. I'm configured right now with the Hawke Anschutz KK50 scope. This has a round reticle that you ghost around the bullseye target for your hold. I really like the scope. It's a very affordable option. The parallax is correctable right down to the indoor ranges that we use. The 50-foot range parallax correction is very, very good. For a couple $100, I really like that scope. Service rifle scopes are not inexpensive. To get decent ones with good parallax correction, especially down to the short indoor yardages, this one has been dynamite. You can get these from Champion's Choice. They're very affordably priced. They have really nice turrets as well. So this is, you know, oftentimes when I'm actually shooting, 1/8" clicks, or probably actually 8th MOA is probably more appropriate, but nice setup for, especially for the cost. I mean, I don't like to qualify things by saying for the price it's good. I think this is a good scope. I have other Hawke products. It's kind of interesting because Hawke is Indiana based as well as Tippmann, so that's kind of neat that local scope, local rifle, I guess you could say. Anyway, so that's what I've changed on it. These are the 10-round magazines that I've been shooting. These are interesting because, you know, they're AR form factor, but what they do is they open up, and I'm probably going to have to set the telephone down to do this. Let me do that real quickly. Okay, there you go. So what you do is you just slide the inner part of the magazine out, and then you have a, it's almost like a loader built right in where you can pull it down, feed them in one at a time. And one of the things I really like about this is as you pull this down, I'm using my finger on the back side, you know, this gets down too low, they actually put another button up higher, so as you fill it, you've got still have a place to use your finger. So I like how they did the magazines. And then when you put it back in the rifle, you press this button in and collapse it. I think I can do it one-handed, there we go. And then it's ready to go in the rifle. So that's how the magazines work. And you know, this one S, that's for my sighters. I carry 4 magazines to the line, sighting ammo, and then 1 for each position, you know, obviously prone, kneeling, and offhand. So I carry 4 magazines to the line with me. So this all being said, what's next? Well, you know, I like shooting service rifles. I'm not a serious service rifle competitor. There's good YouTube information out there on service rifle competition. I like, there's a channel called Conrad. I like watching his information. He's a quite accomplished service rifle shooter and all that. So anyway, I figured that this rifle would be dynamite if it was set up like a service rifle. So, you know, I talked to the guys at Tippmann and said, hey, here's what I think. And they kind of gave me some pointers and said, hey, go about it this way. And that's pretty much what I've been doing. So in general, what I want to do is I want to turn that Tippmann into something like this. You know, this is one of my service rifles. This is a Colt. This is a this is a match target model. Just a very typical featureless, if you will, from that era. No threads. And this one has had a Compass Lake Engineering float tube put on it, service rifle handguard with the floated tube. And this one also has a Compass Lake Engineering 2-stage match trigger in it. This is a Mark AR Mod 1 loopholed scope and mount. So, you know, something similar to this, if I had the Tippmann set up like this, it'd be an excellent practice rifle. The ergonomics would be the same as the big rifle. Now, granted, we only have a 16-inch barrel rather than a 20-inch barrel, but that's just something we'll have to live with. So I've been shopping, and I was going to order some parts from Compass Lake Engineering and all that. Well, then I went and visited one of my friends, Steve, at DART in Dorr, Michigan. And Steve has a nice shop and does a lot with all kinds of different rifles, particularly military stuff, above the gun range. Yeah. So anyway, there's his Facebook page, parts for ARs, M4s, all kinds of good stuff. Steve's a good guy, and he had recently come across some service rifle stuff. So we got to talking, and look what I have. I have a service rifle float tube setup. And for those of you that are not familiar with how these work, what they are is they're the typical A2 handguards, but rather than the handguard mounting on the barrel, there's another internal rigid tube that is attached to the barrel nut that carries the load of the handguard in the sling. You can see the sling swivel is actually attached to the float tube inside, which this is the same type of setup that was on that service rifle that I just showed. The one that was on that other rifle is a Compass Lake Engineering. I'm not sure if this one is White Oak or Rock River or whose it is. It's a little bit different style on the front, but it's the same execution. So you look down in there, there's a big heavy tube that's attached to the barrel nut, and then of course your delta ring just holds your handguards on. I'll slip this off real quick, and then you can see. Just prop the phone up there for a minute. Inside the handguard, you have this large float tube that's rigidly attached to the barrel nut here. And then this carries the load of your sling in the front of the handguard, so the front mount is all part of that. So basically, this just replaces the barrel nut and goes right on there. Typical service rifle parts. They've been floating barrels that way for a long time. And then also, from Steve's shop, this is an OEM Colt A2 buttstock. It's got the metal trap door. We've got a real Colt spring and buffer here. This buffer tube is going to be used, this buffer is going to be used in the service rifle that I just showed, because that match target model has the old plastic Colt buffer in it. So I will take the plastic buffer out, set it aside, and run this standard Colt buffer and spring in that. This A2 stock is going to go on the Tippmann. So that's where one of the challenges comes in. The Tippmann uses a carbine length buffer tube, and it has a proprietary spring. These are just blowback. It has a proprietary spring pack in there, if you will. They have a name for it. I've forgotten what it is, but I talked to them at Tippmann and they said they put fixed stocks on them. Not a problem. They've done it for other customers. All you have to do is you just have to make a shim, a spacer, if you will, to go inside the rifle length tube to make it the same length as the carbine tube. You know, basically something to take up the extra space, and use the rifle tube or receiver extension rather than the carbine one. So that's something that I'm really looking forward to, putting this on there with the service rifle handguard and the A2 stock. That'll bring it to the configuration that I need. And then also from Steve at DART, I picked up this Milazzo-Krieger target trigger. I'm really happy to have this. These were the thing back in the 90s. There's other options now, but these were a very, very popular service rifle and match rifle trigger back in the day. It's a two-stage, really nice product. I'm going to fit this to the Tippmann, and hopefully it'll run okay. This is one of the early ones that required a little bit of fitting to the selector. So you can see that that selector's been dressed to work appropriately. Hopefully the hole spacing in the Tippmann is on the money where everything will come together. If not, I've got other trigger options, but I would like to put this Krieger in there. That will make me happy. We'll take the ALG ACT out and use that for something else. And then also when I was over at Steve's, I grabbed a service rifle sling. So I've got several of these, but it doesn't hurt to have another one. This is one of the Brownells. I believe they call it the competitor sling. So it's you know, it's not super high end like a Turner or one of those, but it's a decent sling and it will work well. Yeah, here we go. Brownells Competitor Plus. So the next thing to do here is going to be to slip off the handguard, slip the barrel out, put the float tube on, buffer tube, and the A2 stock. I'm going to have to turn a spacer to go in the tube. We'll take a look at that spring pack once I have it out of there and figure out exactly what I need to make for a spacer. So I will check back in a little bit. I took off the float tube and I loosened the barrel nut. So this is a standard setup here, typical match rifle tube. And you can see here the Tippmann barrel is executed a little bit differently than a standard AR. Rather than a barrel extension, it's a straight barrel that plugs into the receiver, and then it has these two half washers that act as the flange that the barrel nut tightens up against the upper. So we'll slide that off the end there. And we could slip the barrel out. There really isn't any reason. The float tube here is just going to go right back on. So I've got the hand guards off here. Here's the float tube itself. The delta ring, it just gets tightened right on there. This uses a spanner to tighten the barrel nut. Tightens on there, and then you adjust the length of the float tube just to have the proper length for the hand guards. So I'll go ahead and get that installed, and then I'll check back in. I guess I can show a little bit of it. Doing things one-handed. It's always a challenge to do things one-handed. I didn't feel like setting up a camera mount today. But so the float tube just slides right on here, and then it'll screw on to the barrel. The barrel, you know, what would be the barrel extension here. Use these half-round washers in that groove. Well, there, the float tube is now on. The barrel's mounted. We're torqued down here. Delta ring comes back. Just have to slip the hand guards on. It's going to look a little different with only the short barrel, since I only have a 16-inch barrel, but I think that that's going to work really well. Adds a little bit of extra weight to the front, but I'll go ahead and get those hand guards slipped on there, and then we'll go about taking off the Magpul PRS Lite and adapting on the new A2 stock. Okay, we have the service rifle float tube and the handguard all fitted. Now we'll go ahead and take this Magpul stock off and swap out the buffer tube. Well, the buffer tube or receiver extension, whatever you'd like to call it, is removed from the lower now. So what we have is some nice anti-seize on there that I put on there the last time I had this apart, so I'm sure that's going to get all over me. But this is a captured spring pack that I just have to push out. There's a little hole in the back of the receiver extension or buffer tube, whatever you choose to call it, so I'll just push that out with a little probe. And then what we'll have to do is to match the length inside the rifle tube in order to make this all work. So let's go ahead and push that out. Let's see if I can get the camera set up in a way that this will work, maybe. I don't really feel like setting up a tripod, but we can maybe make something work here. I'll just prop the camera up right here in place somehow. I probably have a little something I can use. How about a little block of wood? That'll work. So I'll just try not to knock this over while I'm working on it, and I'll try to do it in the camera view. So I've just got a little wire probe here that I'll just push in the back of this, in the hole in the back of it. Real simple. There, now that captured spring pack is coming out. I haven't ever had this apart, so this will be interesting. So it's a lot like similar to like a JP or one of the ones that we use on like a 300 blackout. But anyway, what I have to do now is I just have to accommodate the depth. Now it looks like they might have a shim in this. I don't know if I can see down in there or not. Get my flashlight. Where did I set the flashlight? There it is. Nope, that looks like just the back of the regular buffer tube back there. There just happens to be a little bit of oil in there. But, see down in there. But I just need to take a look at the depth of this tube and make it match this. Now, when that's down in there, it seems to be, it's got an O-ring on there, so it's real nicely captured. That's just a tiny, tiny bit proud right there. So if I, and when this was screwed into the receiver extension, it just, just comes into the back of the receiver just enough that it makes contact with the back of the carrier. So I just need to make a shim to go inside of my other buffer tube. Shouldn't be too hard to figure that out. I can probably just use a depth gauge and figure out what to do. So slide this back out again. Now, I probably have inside of here, the shim is on the out for that. Yeah, you've got that spacer, this spacer on the back of the buffer tube that makes the receiver extension tube is the same length for both the A1 and an A2 stock, and this is the one that makes it for an A2, and this is a nice one too. I think that might even be metallic. These are supposedly, according to Steve, this is actually a real live Colt stock. There's the screw. So in general, what I have to do is I have to make a shim, or a spacer, if you will, to go behind this captured spring pack so that it is flush at the front. Just using a punch in the back here to push that up to where it ought to be. So this needs to ride. It's actually pretty tight in here. I just need to measure the depth and get that to ride about right there. So that's about how much protrusion it had on the carbine buffer tube, and it's spring loaded, so it'll be good. So what I will do is I will simply press this down until it's bottomed out in the back of the tube, take a depth measurement, and figure out how big of a spacer I need. And what I can do is, to gain a little bit of weight in the buttstock of the rifle, I can turn that out of a piece of steel so that it's heavy rather than using aluminum. Aluminum would certainly be a little easier, but if I turn it out of steel, it'll be a little heavier and add some weight to the butt of the rifle rather than putting lead in the and I don't think it'll take much because this rifle balance is pretty good with that optic on it. So that's the next step, is I'll start working on a spacer. Okay, here's the spacer that I turned down just out of a piece of scrap steel. If I want more weight, I suppose I could fill up the inside of that with lead. This is about 2.65 inches long, and it seems like it's going to be just about right. Let's go ahead and give it a try here. I'll set the camera down again, see if we can see what's happening. There we go. So this will go into the tube, and then this buffer will go in here like so. Look at that, just a little bit proud, just like the other one was. So we should be all set there. Tipping the camera over, so now I just got to screw this all back together and then think about putting that buttstock on there. The spring and the detent still laying there waiting for my that'll do. Super cool. So now I have a rifle length receiver extension. It's a real Colt one too. Got the shim down in the stock. Tipping things over. Push the detent in, looks good. Then there's the screw. Grab a screwdriver. Need to get my bigger screwdriver. This is not the right one to torque this down with. There we go. This is the one that we need. Not quite lined up in the front there. Detent's in, springs in. Looks lined up well. There we go. Now that is looking good. We'll wipe that down and get it all taken care of. Well, it does feel good at the weight wise. It'll be interesting to see how it feels when it's all on the rifle. So I suppose the next thing to do now is to go ahead and change out the trigger. I'm going to need 2 hands for that, so I'm going to do that off the camera. Well, the M4-22 is all put back together, and you can see that it certainly resembles a service rifle now. So for comparison's sake, yeah, we got a little bit different barrel length there, but for the most part, we're going to have the same ergonomics. We'll get the sling put on it. Unfortunately, I could not use the Krieger trigger. The shape of the top of the hammer was not compatible with the bolt carrier group in the Tippmann M4, so I just put the ACT back in it. I'll look on the shelf and see what else I have or come up with something different. So we still have our Colt buffer and spring that will end up going in this rifle. We'll take the plastic one out of this rifle and put the other regular Colt one in there, set the plastic one aside for later, just as a collectible piece, I suppose. But now I've got the Tippmann M4-22 in a configuration that's going to feel a lot like a regular service rifle, so I'm pretty happy about that. Everything went together real well. Barrel nut worked fine, float tube worked fine. I did put a standard A2 grip on it, and I don't think that's a Colt grip. I think that's some sort of an aftermarket mil-spec. You can see, I think this one's a Colt one. I believe that this is the original one on this rifle. A little bit more rounded on the corner, so I'll get a hold of Steve over at DART, and I'm sure that Steve can come up with a real Colt grip for me for the Tippmann M4, and then I'll have pretty decent setup. So I think that's about all for now. We'll get this out and shoot it, package up all the parts that I didn't use and put them away, clean some of this anti-seize off of the Tippmann carbine tube because that's just going to be a mess later on. But I chose to take the Tippmann grip off, which this sure looks like a Magpul grip to me. I'm not sure though. Maybe Magpul makes this for Tippmann, or maybe it's just super similar. But I say I put a regular mil-spec grip on there. We'll evaluate that as it goes along. I might get this out and shoot it yet this afternoon, and go from there. I'm excited to give it a try now that it's set up more like a service rifle. So thanks everybody for watching.